gathering of 100 or so individuals, both male and female. They were approximately human but hideous, hunched and inbred looking, with misshapen faces, straggly colourless hair, toothless mouths, misproportioned limbs, and a sickly, pallid complexion. Most were almost naked, save for a few scraps of rags, but a few wore recognisable, though insanely battered clothing. There were top hats, bowlers, and threadbare waistcoats, and from the Edwardian periods. Mixed in with these were 18th century wigs, tunics and hats that looked medieval, and even a Roman centurion's helmet, shorn of its feathered ornaments. Behind this crowd, bathed in the light of two greenish-white phosphorescent lamps, and carved from the same basalt-like stone as the passageway, was a statue of the same grotesque I had seen on the tree. The hideous crowd were turned towards the idol, offering chants in a strange guttural tongue which seemed to combine a debased form of Latin with English, and a handful of words that seemed to have no relation to any known human language. At the sight of all this I felt sick with terror. Behind my initial horror, however, was a creeping realization, far more awful, slowly dawned. The idiosyncratic clothing and self-scripted Esperanto of this hideous crowd gave a clue to its origins. Generations of luckless individuals had been drawn, as I had been drawn, through that nightmare passageway to this spot, where they had formed a community and bowed down in worship of the Gorgon thing before me. As the rest of my experience, the timeless and dimensionless tunnel, the origin of this grotesque, or of this chamber, or how these troglodytes fed and supported themselves, I could not begin to speculate. All I had known or believed about the nature of the universe was flung into confusion now. The crowd turned to me, their warped faces and dead black eyes displaying no apparent surprise at my presence. They spoke in their strange language, but through the unfamiliar syllables I eventually discerned a phrase of English. "You will worship him." This was uttered not as a command or a request, but a flat, simple prediction. As I backed away, the assembled Morlocks made no attempt to stop me, so I turned and fled. I was back in that insane passageway, all familiar concepts of time and space and mockery once more. I ran on, heedless for what could have been millennia. Though I never turned or changed my course, I stumbled back into that chamber, and was faced once more by the troglodyte crowd. They had not moved since I had fled. Madly, with a sense of utter futility, I turned to run again. Once more I was plunged into the dimensionless tunnel. Once more I fell back into the entrance to that accursed hallway. Again I ran, again I came full circle. The inbred things started to laugh, their voices oddly distorted and muffled now. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped me. I forced my lungs to let out a yell, but still no sound would come. The laughter grew louder and even more distorted. Behind them that evil statue seemed to grow and take on an organic malevolence. Then the far wall of the chamber appeared to dissolve. I was drawn, without ever seeming to move, past that hideous idol, into a new dimensionless chamber, lit this time with that same phosphorescence as the lamps had produced. There were shapes and carvings all around me, but these seemed to shift and distort as soon as I looked upon them. Again I felt as if I were not in any sane or conceivable universe. Presently, however, one object revealed itself before me. I retained its shape long enough for me to grasp its outline. It was a thing from the tree, not a carving or an idol, but the real creature. Living and horrible, sat hunched upon a pale grey throne. The fish-like head was there in every detail, large and incongruously juvenile atop an emaciated body. At least 30 feet tall, the creature was vaguely humanoid, but its arms were disproportionately long and culminated in 7-fingered, claw-like hands. The legs were short and stumpy, with webbed, elongated feet. Bone and muscle pushed horribly against the scaly hide, with no trace of body fat to interpose between the thing's skin and innards. At first the creature appeared to be charcoal grey with glistening jet-black claws. Slowly I realised that the colours were truly unfamiliar to me. Just as I had walked through a tunnel lit by darkness now, I had beheld a creature in different shades of black. The beast's half-closed eye was suddenly lit by the now familiar phosphorescent glow. Slowly it raised its head, and as it did so I saw the exposed brain tissue of its wounded side, shockingly white against the darkened head, and crisscrossed by veins glowing and pulsating with that same phosphorescent. The awful mouth glowed with it too. The thing did not rise from its throne, but simply stared at me with inscrutable malevolence. By some unknown means I realised that this was not the creature's true outline. No, I was in a universe outside my comprehension. The real nature of the beast was beyond my senses. It had, out of mischief, assumed a form I was uncomfortable with. With every sinew of my will I tried to force my own voice out, until at last it came. "Let me out!" The insane dimensions vanished instantly, replaced by tranquil surroundings and a new sound, its benevolence so alien after my nightmare experience that at first I did not recognise it. It was the sound of birdsong. I was under that weird tree, staring at that seemingly carved wooden grotesque, an obvious illusion, pareidolia, nothing more. Shaken, I turned away, my demented illusions already fading into fragile memory, as a dream might. I looked along the path. There were no signs of that passage entrance I had imagined myself crawling through in my insanity. I walked briskly, keen now to leave those woods and seek answers and a cure to whatever disorder had created my aberrant experiences. As I walked towards the road, I dimly noted that these woods seemed denser than I had remembered. There were fewer saplings and far more trees were dead or dying. Still, I could no longer trust my mind, I knew that much. I reached the road where I had parked my bicycle. There, where I had locked it to the gate, was a rusted heap of steel bars and the battered remnants of a wheel. At least 50 years of decay, probably more. I stood dumbly. Fear had gripped me so strongly before that I now lacked even the energy to panic. Muttering faintly to myself, I turned to look at the road. It was not the battered old country lane I remembered. The road was smooth and composed of a black shining substance, quite different from asphalt. I stared. None of the verges were the same as I remembered them either. I stepped out into the road to try to get my bearings. The blaring sound of a horn broke my reverie. Approaching rapidly was a car, sleek and silent, wheelless and hovering a clear foot above the ground. I dived into the verge and ran back into the woods. They were denser. The concrete clearings all gone now, entirely subsumed by trees. I headed to where I knew the remains of the house to find nothing. Only more trees, fully mature, and just a handful of scraps of brick scattered upon the ground to suggest there had ever been a home here. But the tree with the grotesque was the same as when I had first spied it. Since that day I have lived from hand to mouth, begging, scavenging, surviving however I can, and evading the authorities of a world in which I, out of time, do not belong. Whenever I can, I return to those woods, desperately searching for the one familiar thing, that passageway back to the chamber where I may escape, bow down and worship the sacred figure, the only refuge in this unfamiliar world. I long for only one thing, to gaze once more upon that blessed face I spied so long ago, upon that timeless tree among the ruins.